Hi, and welcome into Me Mean the Movies Open Dialogue. This is Thomas Manning, and recently got a chance to sit down with filmmaker Holland Gallagher talking about his new documentary, May the Lord Watch, the Little Brother Story, which is about the hip hop group Little Brother from Durham, North Carolina. And Holland was the director and editor of this film, and it was a passion project of his, and it really just chronicles the all-encompassing story of this very important group in hip hop history, and composed of Phonte, Big Pooh, and Ninth Wonder, and just kind of charts their path and shows us where they came from and their rise to success, and also a bit of their breakup and then their reunion. It's really a beautiful story, and I think for people in North Carolina, especially fans of pop culture in North Carolina, just fans of hip hop in general, I think this is a must watch, and it's one that I really appreciate and one that I certainly enjoy talking with Holland about. So thank you again to Holland Gallagher for his time, and I hope you all enjoy this conversation as we speak about May the Lord Watch the Little Brother Story. Thanks for watching and listening. Well, looking to, your documentary, The Little Brother Story, I'd love to have you think back if you can remember the very first time that you heard Little Brother, if you can remember that experience, and I guess how that shaped, your love for who they are.
Yeah, well, as the story goes, man, I met Phonte kind of randomly at the Uber line at LAX, just randomly. We were on the same plane from RDU, and I had spotted that he was wearing like the same hoodie that he was wearing on one of his album covers, which is why I recognized him because I was not like the biggest Little Brother fan coming up. I'm like kind of a generation younger than their typical fan base. So like kind of when I was coming up, it was like the blog era. So it was like J. Cole and Drake. That kind of whole scene was the music that influenced me. But obviously, being from Durham and being from North Carolina, I was familiar with Little Brother and the influence that they had on the state. And funny enough, at the time, I was like helping produce a podcast uh, that was about rap in North Carolina that a couple of my buddies were hosting in for this streetwear brand called Runaway in Durham that I worked at, and they were huge Phonte and Little Brother fans, and so I knew that they would be upset with me if I didn't go and talk to Phonte. And so I walked up to him, said what's up, and also at that time I had just finished making a web series, kind of like inspired by Issa Rae and the High Maintenance people, um, called Hype, that I was premiering in Durham in a couple of months. So I went up and talked to Phonte. I told him about this podcast that my homies were on. They were huge fans. And then I invited him to come to the premiere at the Carolina Theater in Durham of my series Hype. And so he ended up coming to that premiere, really took to the show. And like that same weekend was the weekend of the Art of Cool reunion where they all happened to get back together. So he invited me to his house that same weekend where kind of all this stuff was going down, and basically asked me to do the documentary then and there. And so that's when I like kind of really sunk my teeth into Little Brother's music and kind of became a fan from then on out. So yeah, I don't have this story of being like an enormous Little Brother fan since I was like in middle school or whatever, but thousands of other people do, which is why we've got the reception we got, I guess.
And the state of North Carolina is such a huge part of the DNA of who Little Brother is and who they are as musical artists. So for you as a filmmaker, and for you in capturing the story of Little Brother, how has North Carolina served as a source of inspiration in that regard?
Yeah, huge honor for me as a person from North Carolina to be able to help bring the story to life. Yeah, I mean, it's baked into the DNA, like you said, of the group and of the story and of who we are, as the group of people that made the movie. Obviously, Fonte is from like Red Springs, North Carolina, which is like a small rural town kind of outside of Fayetteville. And like I went there several times to shoot B-roll for the doc, like to interview his grandma. We were running around the state to get interviews with all sorts of people. There's a lot of Durham footage in the movie as well. And so I think it's represented not only visually, but also from a narrative perspective, because these guys were kind of like the originators of North Carolina hip hop, like Luke says in the doc. And so yeah, it just means a lot. I mean, it's kind of baked in every way. Also
And
being, I guess, like maybe a better answer is also like North Carolina is not like the epicenter of rap culture and not the epicenter of the music industry, certainly. And so I think kind of reflecting like little brother story as obviously kind of these underdog figures who never sort of got the traction within the industry, never left North Carolina to sort of chase that, um, is kind of part of their story also. And so it's like, yeah, they're from North Carolina, but they're still here, like they're all still here.
And with such an extensive career, some breaks in between with Little Brother, but they've been around for 20 years or so. And can you elaborate on your process of choosing which Little Brother albums to focus on more intently in the narrative? And I'm sure it was difficult to not spend as much time on all of the projects as you wanted, but just working out the pacing on that front.
Yeah, that's a great question because the challenge of making a documentary that spans 2 decades, like you said, and covers artists with such a extensive catalog is making those decisions. And once we sort of decided that the center of the narrative was going to be on Pooh and Phonte's relationship, that kind of shaped the whole thing. It's like we choose then the moments that were kind of the turnkey moments for them individually, not just like for the group. And so it's like we spend a lot of time on the listening because this is when sort of their dreams come true. And it's like you get this sort of aspirational part of their story that you as a viewer can kind of relate to. Everybody has like kind of a dream, and theirs came true to some degree at that time. So we spend a lot of time there, but also because this is kind of when they, as two people who were like, just guys that went to college together that were rapping together, suddenly get thrust into this other thing. And how are they going to react to that from a relationship standpoint? And then when we get to the minstrel show, obviously the relationship with Ninth devolves a little bit. And Pooh and Phonte are on tour together. And so focusing on the events in their career that were sort of turnkey in their individual relationships were the things that we wanted to spend a lot of time on. Obviously, the music story is there in the forefront as well, but it's really about Pooh and Thomas's relationship and who they are as people. And Little Brother is a part of that, but it's not the whole story.
And with the animated sequences in the film, which kind of go back and look at things that obviously you don't have documentary footage for, what went into the decision making when figuring out which specific scenes to represent in that way with animation?
Yeah, so we originally had a different idea that was kind of going to be like drunk history reenactments. The idea being, and the idea holds true with the animation, is that we wanted the movie to feel like a Little Brother album. And that means, although you have the poignant kind of like realism and the down to earth kind of bars and all this stuff, you also have these moments of levity, and you have the skits in the Little Brother albums. And so the analogy here, we're going to be the skits that we were going to do. For scheduling reasons, that didn't work out. So kind of last minute, we we hit Creative Junk Food, this animation studio, and we pitched them, I think three or four scenes that we felt were the pivotal kind of ones to animate. Again, like you said, like you referred to, there's sort of like a logistical issue when you're making a documentary set in the past. If you don't have archival footage, it's like, what are you going to put on screen? It's sort of just a question you have to answer. And so we went to them, we pitched them three scenes that we felt like were really just kind of dialogue heavy, that we didn't have very much great visual representations for. And they saw the cut of the movie, and they were just kind of so excited by it that they came back and they had like 12 all the ideas that you saw in the documentary, and they were like, can we just do all of this stuff? And we were like, if you could do it like in a month, yes. So they kind of came back and like way over delivered. And we gave them a tone note, but all of the jokes that are like kind of in there, was it all just like stuff that they did on the fly. And it really does exactly what we hoped it would do, which is like really kind of shape the tone of it in parts that end up a little bit like petty or maybe kind of melodramatic. When you see the same thing animated, it really cuts it. And kind of on the other side too, moments that were like a little saccharine or kind of like too sweet, for their own good, we cut it the other way with the animation also. And so yeah, it really did a lot to shape the film. And when we played it for audiences, when we did our screening tour, it like killed everywhere, and everyone like really loved it. So yeah, I was really excited about that, and shout out to them for coming through in the clutch.
And I'd also love to give you a chance to speak a little bit more about just generally working with Pooh and Phonte, because I don't think very many people of their stature would be as open to collaboration as they were. And I think that really just speaks to how down to earth they were, that you just bumped into Phonte at LAX and then within a year or so working on this documentary and telling his story. So I guess I'd just love to have you share about that experience and what that meant to you and what that showed you about who they are.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, they are who they are. They're exactly who you would think they would be listening to their music. They're really just down to earth people, um, really collaborative, and really, I think an exemplifying thing on that note is that when you're making a documentary where the artists are involved in the making of the documentary, we see so often that it kind of becomes like a PR thing more than anything. And I think that how vulnerable they were with each other and with themselves, it was the only thing that enabled a movie like this, which is an interview based doc, to be what it was. It's only as good as they're willing to be open about their stories. And a example of that we were telling in the Q&A is that at kind of the low point in their relationship, when Phonte does not reach out to Pooh when he's in the hospital, and it's like this really serious kind of down moment in their relationship. In a previous cut, Phonte had kind of like couched why he didn't reach out to him. He was like, oh, well, I didn't like totally understand how serious it was for him and blah, 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 blah. And then like Phonte himself, after watching the cut, was the one unprompted who was like, you know what, fuck that. Like, I didn't reach out to him. Like, that's just what it was. We don't need, that's what it was. And so that sort of ideology and that kind of ethos from them, because of the people that they are, was the thing that like was the reason that we could make the doc that we made. Yeah.
And in bringing other famous from hip hop, of course, like Questlove, getting them with interviews for this documentary. How was that process of going through the various avenues and having them take part? Because I guess once again that just shows to people like Questlove to how much his respect for Little Brother and just his immense his immense reverence for what they've stood for in hip hop history. So I guess love to have you speak a little bit on going through those process and getting interviews like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was all off the strength of their love for Little Brother. This was a totally independent project. It was, I mean, you saw the credits. It was a small team. We self-funded it and we self-released it. So it wasn't like, hey, you're going to be like, this is going to be a big Netflix or HBO documentary or something like that. It was just like, you're a part of the Little Brother story. And this is the Little Brother documentary, really, I mean, it was nothing more than that. And so it's great from a narrative perspective to have people like that are kind of recognizable figures also championing Little Brother, because people in North Carolina know a lot about him and people who know. But we wanted the audience for this movie to be a little bit broader than just like kind of the rap heads, which is I think why we ultimately wanted to focus on Pooh and Fonte's relationship. And so given that, it's nice to have a recognizable figure like Questlove who comes in and is like, yeah, these guys were the thing, you know what I mean? So that was great. And he's championed it even to this day. I saw him like kind of shouting it out on Instagram. And so having him as a figure who his love for Little Brother and their music transcends, the movie, and that's, it's what it's all about. If you're a fan of something, shout it out, participate. Yeah. So that was great.
And of course, other than Ninth, were there any other interviewees that you really wanted to track down but couldn't for whatever reason?
No, it's just Ninth. Obviously, was in the group at the beginning, and we would have loved to hear his perspective on it, especially for parts where it's them telling a story that he's involved in. From a documentary perspective, I would have loved to have heard his side. I think some of the audience definitely would have as well. But the story was the story. I think it was going to be the same whether he was involved or not. We just would have been a little bit enriched by his side of it. Or you would have understood his reasoning, which you might be curious about as an audience. But yeah, I mean, we just happy didn't respond. So yeah, there's only so much you can do. And I think we did what we could with what we had, and we tried to be fair. Obviously, it was a big question mark for the big fans as to what happened, and we didn't want this to be just like a night hit piece or something like that. It's not really about that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, most definitely. And for you as a filmmaker and a hip hop fan, I'd love to give you a chance to speak to the importance to you of preserving hip hop history and giving important artists like Little Brother their dues, and just documenting that and what that means to you as a creative person.
Yeah, I mean, we it's been a big year for that. Obviously, with the 50th anniversary, there's been a lot of time taken this year in particular to kind of document all this stuff. So to be able to participate in that as a North Carolina filmmaker and be able to document this incredible, really important North Carolina hip hop history story is amazing. But I think what's more enriching for me even than that is just to have developed the relationships with Phonte and Pooh that I have, and me knowing them personally and then getting to kind of like share who they are with a broader audience is the thing that's really exciting to me. They're obviously these great hip hop artists, but they're also really charismatic and interesting and caring people. And I think like the lessons that they had to learn via their relationship are really applicable to anybody. And I admire them as people. And so I'm just glad to get to share who they are with the world.
And I know you've already had great success. We're currently recording this just less than a week after releasing the documentary, but I think you're over 100,000 views on YouTube and
Yeah.
getting a lot of positive reception. Um, so, I guess how rewarding is that for you to see all of the blood, sweat, and tears that you put in this, result in something that's really hitting its target audience and, finding the people who would really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been amazing. The response has been amazing. I think I really felt it when we were out on the tours. We screened it in 5 cities before we put it out online. And because this was an independent doc, it was on our schedule, and that meant that we finished the movie like a week before we went on to screen it. And like in the filmmaking world, that's kind of unheard of. Usually there's like an enormous period between when you're done and when anyone gets the chance to see it because of sort of like festival submissions and like distribution conversations and things like this. So yeah, we literally just finished the movie and we were able to play it for people the next week. And yeah, for me as like also the editor of the movie and someone who's been involved obviously with the project for a handful of years now, this was my first feature documentary also. So going right from like finishing the movie that I had spent all this blood, sweat, and tears, and all of us had making it, to being able to show it and getting this reaction that we had in person. This group means so much to so many people, and we really felt that in the rooms. It was honestly surreal. It was really, really, really cool.
Well, congrats on the film, Holland. It's really been great chatting with you, and I appreciate your time. And I'd love to stay in touch and speak more about whatever else you got going on in the future.
Yeah, that would be great, Thomas. Thanks a lot for reaching out and doing this, man.
Yeah,
Excited
absolutely,
that you got to check it out.
absolutely. Well, I hope you have a great afternoon, and we'll chat more soon.
All right, thanks so much, Thomas.
Yes, sir.
How about you?